Welcome to the Opinionation Podcast, where free speech, opinions, and original thought still matter in America.
Thank you for joining us again for another episode. I am your host, King Daddy. I am going to talk about today a very, very touchy subject to some people. And I am literally floored by a couple of stories that I saw on the news recently that happened locally here in the Charlotte area. The first story was a man and I don't know whether it was his girlfriend or his mother or whatever she was, went into a movie theater and they happened to notice that someone was sitting in their assigned seat. I don't know if you've ever been to an AMC theater. You know, they have the reclining seats and everybody gets to pick where they want to sit. So they go into the theater and there's somebody sitting in their seat. So according to the news story, this gentleman asked the person to politely leave his seat so he can sit down. So he ended up asking him several times, and the guy got up out of his seat and shot him in the leg in the middle of a theater full of people. The police were called. The guy was injured. Now, the guy who was shot was not murdered. He's a pretty badass military guy. I believe they said he was in the National Guard. And he took his shirt off and made his own tourniquet and tied it to his leg. So that was pretty badass on his part to be able to do that. But the bottom line is this person pulled out a gun in a crowded theater and shot the man in the leg over a fucking seat. The other news story that just took place, again in Charlotte, a man went into a Burger King where apparently the female that he was having a domestic disagreement with was working. He went inside this Burger King and he was wielding a gun. He finally left the Burger King and went out into the parking lot where the police were waiting. A female officer asked him to drop his weapon. He refused, and she shot him and killed him. So now, in the midst of all this, we have more protesting. We have people screaming about an innocent life. Now, according to the news story, again, I wasn't there, but according to the news story, this person refused to drop his weapon, and the police officer put him down, as she should have. But here's the kicker. In both of those stories that I have just told you about, the person involved happened to be black. So when the guy got shot in the Burger King parking lot, even though he definitely had, according to the news, a gun in his hand that he refused to drop when the officer told him point blank to drop his weapon, he didn't drop it. But after the shooting took place, the NAACP and a bunch of protesters showed up at Burger King and started screaming about the innocent black life that was taken. But he wasn't innocent. He was a man who had just left a Burger King with people during breakfast time with a gun, went out into the parking lot, refused to drop the gun, and lost his life. That's not innocent. That is nothing that involves protesting. Nobody should have protested that. The only person who should have protested that should have been him, and he should have protested that by dropping his gun, and now he's dead. They arrested the other guy who shot the man in the movie theater, again, a young black man, 18 years old, with a gun in a movie theater full of people. So when you hear the screams and the cries for racism, are they really screaming about racism? Because it sounds like to me they're screaming because they want the rules to be different for them than they do everybody else. Because I never hear anybody speaking about equality or racism for Hawaiian people, Asian people. Very seldom do you hear anybody saying anything about Hispanic people unless it has to do with the fact that they are upset because illegals are taking jobs and supposedly getting benefits. So, does racism really exist? Or are these people looking at circumstantial bias based on behavior and action? That's kind of where I'm leaning, because I don't know anybody, and I know a lot of people. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many people that I have encountered in my lifetime. And I can only think of, in my 54 years of living, I can only think about 5 people total who dislike someone simply because their skin pigment is different than their skin pigment. But I know a lot of people who are upset over the actions of people and the things that people do. I know a lot of Caucasian people who are upset because it seems like every time you turn the television on and cut on the local news channel, that every time somebody robs a store or shoots somebody or commits some type of violent crime, they just happen to be black. Now, I will be the first one to tell you that I know for a fact that all black people do not fit into this category. I know some black people and love and care deeply for some black people who have exemplary lives. They don't commit crimes. They raise their families. They do what they're supposed to do because they are good people. And the bottom line is, here's the problem that I have with racism on both ends of the spectrum. Why can't we just be people? Do we have to have black people versus white people? Mexican people versus American people? Why can't we just be people? But it just so happens that one particular race of people seem to commit more crimes than the other race of people. It sounds like to me they have a community difficulty, but do they really? One of the things that I believe that we have a problem with our oversized government. Now listen to me closely here, because this is the kicker of all this shit. Our oversized government, you have the Republicans on one end of the spectrum, and all they seem to care about are they have a set ticket of values that they like to work on. Taxes, abortion, and they seem to lean very much toward a more upper crest of white people. That is a known fact. The Republicans are generally whiter than the Democrats. There are some black Republicans. I know some. Black conservatives are out there. There are many of them. But for the most part, the standard Republican Party people who are in charge or working in the government are all about white people. The Democrats seem to lean more toward the African American community and helping them. But here's the problem with that, and here's the kicker in all of this. What seems to be help is really a hindrance, because they're not really helping these people. They are keeping them down. They're always wanting to give them new programs and affordable housing and do things to give them a leg up that they feel like the Republicans aren't giving them. But are they really hurting them in the process? Because here's the thing. Anytime you stick a large group of people, and I don't care what race this group of people comes from, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whoever, into one area and everyone is poor, you have problems. So you take all these black people and you keep them poor. They can't have anything. They don't have anything. They're going to beg, borrow, steal, and kill to get whatever it is that they want. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you look at really poor white people who were included in the same type of living arrangement, which is primarily low-rent apartments, trailer park, duplexes, or wherever, there seems to be a higher crime rate there as well. So the problem is not necessarily as racial as it is financial. People commit more crimes when they're poor. People commit more crimes when they feel like their backs are against the wall and they have nothing else to live for. Now, on both sides, there are unnecessary acts of violence that take place just because some people are plain bad. There's nothing you can do to combat the fact that there are some evil son of a bitches living on this planet that just like to do horrible, horrible things, such as the young man who shot the man in the leg at the movie theater and the gentleman who went into the Burger King and would not drop his weapon. Sometimes you just have a bad seed. I don't care where that bad seed comes from. Look right now at this stupid motherfucker Michael Avenatti, the porn star lawyer who wanted to battle dumbass Donald Trump. He is a upper class, and I use the word class very fucking loosely when I talk about this dude, but he is an upper class, wealthy, socialite, Caucasian attorney, and he is a low rent piece of shit. This man is absolutely, based on the history of what we've seen from him thus far, is a low rent piece of shit. And there is absolutely nothing you can do to change that. You could take his money away and he would still be a piece of shit. You can give him more money and he's still a piece of shit. So being a piece of shit does not have to do with the pigment of a person's skin. I don't care what the Black Lives Matter people and the white supremacy people say as they go up against each other and want to start battles with one another and blaming each other for their problems. A piece of shit is a piece of shit is a piece of shit, period. It does not matter where you come from, what color you are, what religion you are, what your background is. If you are a low-life, thieving, robbing, mouthy, violent piece of shit, you're just going to be that. Color has nothing to do with it. So why do we continue to make everything about color? I worked at the hospital for 20 years, and I worked with nurses, doctors, other healthcare workers that were a different race than myself. And most of those people were good, hardworking people that came to their job every single day and did what they were supposed to do and did it very well and were successful at doing it. It had nothing to do with what color they were. It had to do with the amount of get up and go and initiative that person had to go to school and earn themselves an education and get them a job where they could utilize their education and put that education to work for them, have a family, and do the right thing. Nothing to do with color. The right thing does not have color. But anytime you see a group of people, whether they're black people who are shooting, white people who are rednecking and doing whatever the hell they do in the trailer parks and whatnot, they become stereotyped, and those stereotypes oftentimes get mistaken for racial But it's not racial. It's people. We are stereotyping people because of the type of people that they are. I can't reiterate this enough times to let you know that shit is shit, regardless of where they come from or what color they are. They're just shit. I don't understand it. But I do know that there are a lot of white people who are upset because the black people have their own college fund. The black people now have diversity and inclusion and all those things that they do to try to get a leg up and get some jobs. And I can see the spectrum for that being a little tender for white people to deal with, because we can't go out and talk about how difficult it is to do something because we're white. But I don't believe that black people have a problem doing what they want to do because they're black either. I think they have a problem doing what they want to do because other people of their race have created problems, which makes the old adage, one bad apple spoils the bunch, ring true in people's minds, even though it's technically not true. So we're dealing with a perception issue, not a racial issue. Everything does not have to be about race. Quit taking your perception of a certain group of people and pinning it on an entire race of people. But the news media does not make it easy, because if you watch the news, on one end of the spectrum, black people are committing all the crimes, and on the other end of the spectrum, black people need all the help that they can get for affordable housing and everything else that the news media makes you think that they're crying for. But the problem is not near as huge, in my opinion, which is why we're called the Opinion Nation Podcast. I may have a misconception of what's going on in this world, but from the seat that I sit in, and I'm looking out into the world, I do not see the problems that the news media focuses on and wants you to see. I do not see the people in everyday walks of life having issues, getting along with one another, and getting jobs as long as you're equally qualified to get the job. I just don't see that problem. I don't see why we had to sit, when I worked for the hospital, in diversity and inclusion classes when all you had to do to get the job was to go to school, make the grade, graduate, and apply for it. We're not living in 1940 where you walk in somewhere. And I know there are people out there in places like this that somebody walks in and they're different than you. And that's not only a race thing. There are some people who hate you because you're not a Christian. Some people who hate you because you are. There are going to be people who hate something everywhere in this world. But for the most part, in everyday life in America, I do not see the mainstream problems that the news media wants us to see. For the most part, I feel like we're getting along. For example, let me tell you, I have a young man coming to my home. He was supposed to be here today, but it rained last night, so he didn't come. He is a Hispanic young man. He owns his own concrete business. He is a very hard-working young man with work values. Now, I don't know anything about his personal values. That's not my business. As long as he comes over here and does what he's supposed to do, his personal values are not my problem. But he's got really good Google reviews, really nice pictures of the work that he does. He conducted himself when he came to my home and gave me my estimate in a very professional manner. And I did not give him the job because he was white, black, or Mexican. I gave him the job because he is a qualified concrete man. And I need concrete poured. I need a walkway in front of my house to get rid of some of the mud, and he appeared to be the most qualified person that I called. I didn't care what color he was because he matched my requirement for the goddamn job, and that was it. I didn't care about his broken English. I didn't care about his brown skin. What I cared about was the fact that he got out of his truck. He measured what I needed, gave me a fair price, and he had dried concrete all over his boots because he had been out working and doing what he was supposed to do, which if everybody, listen closely people, if everybody just goes out and does what they are supposed to do and mind your own fucking business and stay out of everybody else's fucking business, the world will be a better place. So, in a nutshell, I guess the biggest problem that we have in the midst of all of this is not racism, it's not perception, it's not big government interfering in our lives where they have no business being. It is the fact that there are people out there who just don't mind their goddamn business and they always want to be stirring up some shit. We don't need shit stirred up. Let the people that I talked about earlier in this podcast, the ones who are evil from day one, the ones who have no morals whatsoever, let them be the bad people. And that way you can tell the difference in the good guys and the bad guys, because the bad guys are doing what they're not supposed to be doing, and the good guys are doing what they are supposed to be doing, and everybody gets along, and everybody does what they're supposed to do, and everybody acts accordingly to what is right by humanity. And we have a serious problem now where people just don't do what they're supposed to do and they get up in your business. That is our problem. Racism is not near as big a problem as people make it out to be. But the only people who usually scream racism are racist. The only people who ever claim injustice are usually, not all the time, there is injustice out there, but the ones who cry the most injustice are the ones who are perpetuating the most injustice on other people. So if you want to end racism, quit being a goddamn racist. If you want there to be more justice in this world, quit perpetuating injustice on other human beings and get along with everybody the best way you can. And stop focusing on the negative and focus on the positive. What you see on the news media, regardless of how many people that you see that are black that are committing all these crimes, they're just sound bites. Not every black person that you see is walking around wanting to shoot you when you walk around the corner. But the news media wants you to believe that because their job is to stir up shit so they can sell stories, so they can stay on the air. And if you fall for that fucking bullshit, then you're a huge part of the problem. There is no problem. The news media wants to stir shit and create a larger problem where a smaller problem only exists. This is King Daddy for the Opinionation Podcast. If you have any questions or any concerns with anything that you hear on this podcast, I am at opinionation84@gmail.com. I am also at opinionation84 on both Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to comment or email or do whatever it is that you need to do, and I will answer as many of them as I can get to. I try to get to all of them if I have to stay up late past my generally 9 o'clock bedtime. But thank you very much for listening, and you have a wonderful day.